Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bonus Points podcast. I'm Joe Garrett, as always, being joined by Ollie Guy.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Ollie. It's just the two of us together, and we're going to be discussing my selection of game. I think my selection of game, right?
It was yours, yeah.
My one, and that is Alan Wake.
Alan Wake, the writer, the author.
The myth, the legend.
Constantly reminds you through the game. Shall I just get straight into this little Wikipedia?
Yeah, tell me, what is Alan Wake?
Alan Wake is an action-adventure game developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by Microsoft Game Studios. The game was released in May 2010 for the Xbox 360, with a Windows version following in February 2012 and a remastered version in October 2021. The story follows best-selling thriller novelist Alan Wake as he tries to uncover a mystery behind his wife's disappearance during a vacation in the small fictional town of Bright Falls, all the while experiencing events from the plot of his latest novel, which he cannot remember writing, coming to life.
There we go. And so we played the remastered version of it.
Yep.
Which is, I didn't realize, I assumed that, I didn't realize that was like a recent remaster. Because, like, I assumed that was like a PS4 one or something, but then I was like, oh wait, they're doing like the special triggers on like the DualSense controller. I was like, oh no, this is like a PS5 thing, because it looked pretty good, didn't it?
It does still look very good. Very nice looking game. I mean, some of the animations are showing their age a little bit, but I think the graphically, the environments especially look fantastic.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that straight. Like, I'm not saying like let's talk about graphics straight away. I'm just saying that for the footage and our impression, it's based on the remastered one, not the original release. That's what we're doing. But you played the original release at least a bit, isn't that right?
Right, yeah. I played the original release when it came out, and I didn't like it.
Okay.
Which I now realise why I didn't like it. And that is because of a little thing in the game called manuscripts, which at the time I didn't read any of them. I just picked them up and carried on my merry way. So I missed about 90% of what was going on. So
how far through of the game do you reckon, like, I guess if you just give hours, how much do you reckon you gave a chance to it first time round?
I finished it.
Oh, you finished it? Okay.
It's 2010, mate. I was a student. I was like, I had no money.
I guess that's true. I guess like nowadays, maybe with like if it was Game Pass or whatever, you would just like, okay, that's enough. Okay, so you kind of hated it back in the day to finish it, right?
I basically was like, this game is so fun, like unintentionally funny. It's carrying me through. Like I like the gameplay, but I was like, it's so stupid. And the only thing I could remember going into it this time round is the scene where Alan and Barry are drinking at the farm, and that's because me and Chris Guy, friend of the show, used to watch it on YouTube all the time after we finished it because we thought it was so funny. Where he's like, "I'm a rider, I'm drunk." Like we were like, "This is so stupid," but that's all I remembered.
Oh man! So I never played it, but I always wanted to play it. I always like remember seeing the trailers of it back in the day. I remember it being in the time. Do you remember when you would like just download trailers onto your like Xbox? And because I loved that because like YouTube, whether it did, I can't remember, it probably did exist, but like it would have existed, but like really bad quality. So the only way to see good quality trailers that I could find was downloading them directly to 360. So I would end up having a few downloaded, and when I'm like bored waiting for something to download or something, I'll just rewatch a bunch of trailers. There's a few trailers that I know really well, and one of them was Alan Wake, and I always thought this game was cool, but I just never ended up, I never saw it cheap pre-owned basically, so I never ended up playing it. So I want to jump straight off to what you were saying about, so you pick up manuscripts throughout the game, and so because he's a writer, and basically the idea is, as you kind of said in the synopsis, is basically he's kind of finding story and what he's writing is coming true. So he's like this author, he doesn't remember writing this, but it's coming true. So the reason I want to talk about that straight away is because I started off reading all of those manuscripts, but about like a third of the way through I gave up it because I felt like it hurt the pace too much, because there's like manuscripts, there's radios, there's TVs, and I was like, at first I was like, I'm gonna engage with all of it, but it just like, I think it just completely messed up the pacing. It's trying to be dramatic and tension and like you're getting followed by these like things, and then I'm like, oh, I'm just going to stand here for a bit and like listen to this, or like try and read it while he's talking over it. And so like, I felt like I understood the story okay. I don't know if I missed anything, but I felt like it killed the pacing too much.
Yeah, so just quickly, the game's basically like a third-person survival horror game. Well, it's a third-person action game with scary elements, I guess. But one of the things is because he's a writer, is you find manuscript pages that predict the future, or they're set in the past, and you don't know when you read them at first if they're going to be set in the future or the past. And it'll be like, oh, I was in the train yard and it was really dark. The lights all went out, and then that's when I heard the chainsaw, and you're like, oh my god. Like, you read it and you're like, oh no, that means like somewhere in the future I'm gonna find this. And then there'll be other things as well that'll be like, to do more with the story rather than with the gameplay. But I read every manuscript and I watched every TV show, but I didn't bother with the radios because they were like, I don't really know what they were about. They were particularly difficult to stand by. But so basically the thing with the manuscript is like, it's kind of revealing the story to you ahead and behind of where you are. So that's basically what you've missed out on if you haven't read them.
Yeah, it's just, I'm surprised because I felt like I might have missed like some foreshadowing, I suppose, but I didn't feel like characters were showing up that I didn't know about, and like sometimes I'd have like a quick glance through them, and the thing is, I'm like, a lot of them are quite hidden and collectible, so they can't be that crucial because otherwise they'd be more on the main path.
Yeah, it was about, I don't know, an hour in, maybe an hour and a half in, that I was like getting suspicious of this game, and I was like, okay, why is it like so weirdly written, and why is every character like worshipping Alan? Like, every character seems to know who he is. Like, I didn't even know what some of the most famous authors in the world look like, but everyone knows who he is. And I was like, oh, it's because he's writing it, so of course they're gonna love him, and of course they're gonna worship him. And then I was like, when I realized that, I started reading them more because I was like more interested in that side of it. So that's kind of what got me to
I was just thinking like, oh, this is like the smallest of small towns, really isolated, like a D-list celebrity would be a big deal showing up there because no one ever. So that was kind of what I was thinking, is he's like this best-selling author, and like no one ever normally goes there that doesn't live there. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, I don't know how much I feel like we're getting into this way too quickly, but I don't know how much I want to give them credit for that, or if it was an accident, because like it's said multiple times in the game that Alan's not a very good writer. So I was like, oh, it makes sense that it's like schlock because he wrote it.
He was on like TV on like a late night chat show talking about his books.
It's like he's not like respected by, like Stephen King would be like someone they meant the first words in the game is Stephen King, but like they're kind of seen as being on different levels. Like he's very mainstream and like not that good, and he kind of knows he's not that good. Yeah. So that's the other thing. I don't know if you get those through the stories as well, that like basically he wrote Alex Casey or something. I can't remember. I think it might be Alex Casey. And that was like really famous. And he was like, I don't know how to follow it. Yeah. So he gets stuck trying to write these like horror novels.
Well, it's really fun. I watched an interview with Sam Lake, who was the creative director and wrote most of this game. The face of Max Payne, for those that want to put a face to a name. And so he was saying that like Alan Wake kind of mirrored like their like Remedy, the developers of this game, because they had just made Max Payne, this really popular series about like a hard-boiled cop. Like this was extremely successful, and then they were struggling to follow up because we'll get into it probably a bit more later. But this game had a troubled development, and so it kind of, the story of the game, whether it started off intentional or not, ended up kind of being a parallel to like the real life development of the game, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. I think it's a cool concept and it's a cool idea, but my main takeaway from this game, are we doing this too early? It's basically that there's no greater truth to be found, and it's kind of like, oh, it sounds really deep, but it's not really. It's kind of as deep as what our discussion we've just had that was less than 10 minutes is we've kind of covered everything. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not much more to it than that. But I didn't mind that. I was enjoying the rides.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going into it expecting like, I think because it was Remedy, I was expecting this would be a good story with good writing, and then like the gameplay would have aged and I would have to kind of put up with it. But I think it was, if anything, it's probably closer to the other way. And I think in a lot of regards, the gameplay's like held up decently well. And then the writing, I think, while interesting and unique, and like I love that it's so sincere and really going for something. Like I don't hate it, but I wouldn't call it elegantly written.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is it, right? So, like, I think it's sincere in trying to go for it because Alan is this po-faced, tortured genius, and he's writing it. Like, he's writing it, which is why it's coming out like that. And everything he says is said with, like, such, like, gravity, even though it's just, like, nonsense. The stuff he comes out with is so stupid. And you've got to think the people that made this game, they're referencing, like, Twin Peaks, Stephen King, like, constantly referencing these, like, amazing artworks. I don't think they would drop the ball like this if they weren't doing it on purpose. Like, I think that there's got to be an element in there where he's like, because Alan is so awful. Like, he's a great character, but because he's terrible. That's what I like about him. Like, he's so flawed. It's unbelievable. Like, there's a bit where a therapist asks him something and he punches him. And it's just like, what is wrong with you? Like, you are horrible.
He seems quite, like, inconsistent as well, because there's like he's generally pretty like flat and straight, and then like every now and then it's like there's a scene where they wanted him to be like the quippy fun guy, and it's like,
yeah,
where's the, and then it's like, oh, everyone's like fine, he's suddenly like this. It's like, well, which lane is he in? Like, he's suddenly Nathan Drake for like a scene.
Yeah,
and then, like,
I feel like his scenes with Barry and the sheriff, when they kind of get together, that's when he's a bit less guarded and like a bit more funny. But the scenes where he's interacting with literally anyone else, he is like the most horrible man ever. And like, he's deluded and like egotistical and just like really unpleasant. And the funny thing about him is, like, through the game, he doesn't really get likable. Like, he stays bad. And by the end, he's like ever so slightly more bearable, but he's still like, this guy stinks. And I actually I respect that choice for making him. I think when we spoke the other day briefly about it, you did call him Mr. Charisma, which I thought was quite funny. Because he's like, the other thing as well about him writing it is, like, Barry, his agent, is obviously like this greasy, like, wheeler dealer dude who just, like, he's literally called Barry Wheeler. He's literally like gonna rip off all of his clients, and he's talking about there's a band in the game, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take them around Europe and like basically rip them off. But to Alan, he's like, he's my best friend and he'll do anything for me. It's like, well, of course you'd think that, because he's ripping you off. Like, so it's just stuff like that. There's like lots of little touches in the game that make me think they must have written it like that. On purpose. But I don't want to give them too much credit if they did it, but it does seem that way.
I mean, it kind of ended up working out. There's just one funny bit with Barry I want to mention, is like, there's a bit where so we'll get into like gameplay a bit more, but there's like the darkness, so like basically having light is really important. And there's this character who I don't actually know her name, Light Lady, we'll call her. This lady who knows about all of this stuff, and she's got like this, like, the well-lit room, which is a room full of loads of lights. And then she's talking about like how important she keeps like a spare generator, and she changes all of like the bulbs all the time. And then Barry's like starts making jokes about how like crazy she is. It's like, what? Like, you've seen like all of the stuff going on in the world. Like, you know this stuff is real, and she's being careful so it doesn't kill you. And it's just like, yeah, they wanted to go hard on the comic relief for him, but I don't know how well they start the landing.
Yeah, there's also like a little bit of like, maybe, in that Alan wants to look really clever, so he's going to be like, Barry's an idiot, doesn't understand. Because there's another bit where he gets a manuscript written by Thomas Zane, and he's like, oh, he's one of the great writers. I've never read anything like this. It's like, who's like another writer in the game. He's like, oh, it's so brilliantly done. Like, this guy's a real master of prose or whatever. And then he gets a text from someone who's in the town, and the first thing he says is like, none of the words are spelt right. So like, he's like projecting massively like his own opinions on everything as well. Like, that's how it's coming together. I mean, I guess we'll find out if that's the case, but it seems to me like, I don't know, it's a difficult line to walk, and they've either absolutely nailed it on purpose or by accident, because it did smooth me over. I did enjoy this game a lot. So, like, because I enjoyed the gameplay too, so it's like I got a double whammy here. I was having a great time.
Should we move on to the gameplay? Because we've not really kind of mentioned about that. So you kind of said, as you said, kind of like third-person action with kind of like horror-y vibe. I guess the game's gimmick to I guess use that term. Its like main mechanic is kind of light and dark. So the enemies, the Taken, they're called. They kind of have like a darkness shield on them that before you can kind of damage them with any conventional weapons, you basically need to break it away. And that's usually done by shining your torch on them, but then you also get things like a flare gun and flash grenades, and then things in the environment as well. You can kind of like turn on lights and kind of point them at them as well to then go and take them out. Like how much did you kind of enjoy that as a mechanic?
I think the controls, like, so it has a dodge mechanic, which like isn't that good. But the shooting and aiming is fun, you know, like I found it very playable. It's a simple gameplay loop. I feel like this era of games where like there was a lot of simple gameplay loops. It was like Halo. You throw grenades, you run at them shooting, then you swing your melee. And Gears of War, you hide, you do your tactical reload. Like it has these kind of quick loops, and this game's one is shine the torch, run in, and dodge, or drop a flare if they get too close. And like it was fun for me. It's a shame there isn't that many enemies, but like as in enemy types.
I was gonna say, I think that's what's different to things like Halo and Gears. Is Halo and Gears throughout will keep introducing new enemies and new weapons, whereas this game it's like you got, I mean, like basically pistol, shotgun, and hunting rifle. And then like I guess like flare gun and like flares and stuff as well. And you get like all three of those about halfway through the game, and then like nothing new until the end of the game. And very few enemy types, and then of the new they introduce, like often they're not great. It'll be like, oh, now like inanimate objects will fly at you, or like the birds fly at you, and you shine both of them you deal with by shining a torch at, and are probably some of the weaker moments of the game.
Yeah, it's like the enemies are, I mean, I can literally list them off. Regular dude, big guy, fast guy, bird.
Yeah, and then object, and then I guess and then there are some boss fights, but that would be like a combine harvester that has been taken over.
Yeah, and those bits were not that good.
Yeah, they are not,
those bits were
not particularly amazing. I think the problem with me is like I like the idea of it, but like ultimately in terms of gameplay, if we kind of just focus on like shooting and using the torch, it's almost like every enemy you have to shoot with a laser and then shoot. And I think that kind of makes weapons like the shotgun, which otherwise I think the shotgun feels great. I mean, shotguns generally do feel great.
All the guns feel pretty good, I think. All the guns,
but I think
they sound
especially
great and like,
But I think like, wouldn't it be fun if it's like 5 enemies rushing in the room and you're like shotgunning, like spinning them, but it's not. It's like aim for a bit, shotgun, aim for a bit, shotgun. And I'm like, and sometimes like there's like moments where like you do a flare, or there's a bit with like a helicopter where it's shining light down at them, and I'm like, oh, this is great, because I'm like pow pow pow, like taking them all out. And it's not that it's too difficult with the torch, because when you're shining the light you kind of freeze them, and there is interesting mechanics there. Like I don't hate it as a mechanic, but I do feel like I would have kind of had more fun if I was just shooting them normally in most situations.
I mean, one thing to say about the shooting and the torch and the rest of it is that I think the sound design is incredible in this game. Like the sound of when you're burning them or whatever you're meant to be doing, and it's like the violins and then the sound of them exploding and then the sound of the gunshots, like all of them sound so good. And also the sounds of being snuck up on. You get that like little sting of music, and it's like, oh, I know to dodge forward now because there's someone right behind me. The sound design is, I thought was fantastic, and the licensed music as well. Really good licensed music in this game.
The one thing with the sound design that I did notice, and I don't know how they would solve it, I don't know how other games solve it, or why I only noticed it on this game, is so obviously when there's like enemies around, it plays kind of like the combat music or the scary music, is like when like they die, there's a really noticeable fade out, and I don't know if it like fades out too quickly, or if it's just like they fade out instantly and they're not, maybe some games time it with a note or transition it or something, but like that was the one thing that was like, I don't normally notice this, but I'm really noticing a hard shift from like combat mode to safety woods mode. And it's not a big criticism, but that is something that did stand out.
Yeah, also the music for combat and stuff, like it seemed to all be like completely different. Like sometimes it would be like electronica, sometimes it would be like licensed, like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater style, and sometimes it would be like, you know, violins. You never knew what you were going to get when music started.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. And then there was one I thought it was a stand-up moment where you're kind of on like a rock concert stage, and it's like waves of enemies kind of coming at you, almost like Left 4 Dead style. and you're like holding them out, and you've got like loads of stuff to play with. And there's a few little moments like that where you kind of have a standoff against waves of enemies. And I think that's where the lighting mechanic really works, because there is a lot of decisions about like, because sometimes you could turn a light on and be like, if I stand here, I can guide them into this, and I'm going to flare those guys to hold them back so I can focus on like this group. Like, even though you're not really building up defenses, I think that works better rather than most of the combat, which is you walking through the woods and every 5 minutes, like 6 enemies will jump out at you.
Yeah, you basically have like 2 things you do in this game. You have like daytime, which is normally 5 minutes of you being in a location, speaking to a couple of people, and then they usually say, can you go and get this thing for me and bring it back? And you either do that in the daytime or you transitions to night, and then you go into the woods, which looks unbelievable, but it is only one location. That used to be the whole game, but it does look really good. Yeah. Where you basically run through the woods, fight enemies, and then you wake up back again. And that's kind of all you do for 10 hours. But like, for me, because this is my favorite genre, like these kind of survival horror third-person games, I found it very playable. Like, and I know that it's really sloppy. Like, picking up guns is so difficult. Like, so many things about it like are not great. But for me, it was just like, I can literally play this for hours and it's fine. Like, it just melts away because it's like, close enough to Resident Evil that I don't have to think too much about it when playing it, basically. But
what did you think? Sorry.
I was just going to say one more thing on the enemies and the sound design. One thing I did really like was their like call outs that they do.
Oh yeah, because they're taken. Basically, the idea of the enemies is they're just normal people of the town, but they've been kind of taken over by the darkness. And so they can often shout like very normal things, but in like quite a frantic way. Do you have any like standout examples?
I knew you were going to ask me, so I wrote one down. My favourite one by far that genuinely made me laugh out loud was, fishing can be a hobby or a job.
That is a great one.
I was like, that's fantastic.
But they don't say it in a normal way. They like shout. They shout it in like, say if you're watching our like Bloodborne Let's Play, they're going like, away, or this doesn't. Yeah, they shout it like that, but just shouting just like, like there's discounts at the store or whatever.
Yeah, literally, yeah, like salt's not good for an older man's diet. Like,
I did really enjoy that, and it's a good way because it's a little bit more of a grounded setting. And so they need a way to kind of justify having this, and I'm so glad they're not like black smoke beings. Like I'm like, I think it's good that they are like more human rather than like I think of like to compare to another list game like Prey, and I'm like, those enemies, like they're just not that satisfying because they're all kind of different shaped black blob things, and I think that is agree. Like I think that can get old pretty quick, and the fact that the enemies kind of had character and they are otherworldly, so you don't feel bad like killing them all, but they are a little bit more grounded, I think work really well. Yeah,
for sure. So you were going to say something before I cut you off to tell you fishing can be a hobby or a job.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you something, but before I ask you that, one other thing about the combat is I mentioned it a bit earlier, but I think the DualSense, the way I'm sure most of you know, but on the PS5, there's kind of like resistance they can add at different stages pulling down the trigger. I think this is the best use in an actual game I've seen. Like so the way you do your flashlight is if you pull it down, you shine your light, and that will kind of slow enemies and be used as a light. But then if you pull it all the way down, you'll kind of focus the beam and it will drain the battery quick, but you can kind of break their darkness quicker. But it's like such like a solid like 2 steps.
For sure.
And like that I felt like that was like such a perfect use for the DualSense. I was like, it feels like the whole game was designed with that in mind from the beginning, but obviously it wasn't, let alone, it wasn't even designed with that light dark mechanic until the very end. But it feels like such a perfect fit.
One enemy actually we didn't mention, and I'd like to just call out as being absolutely terrible, is the black blobs that are just on the floor.
Oh, just things you can walk onto.
And you stand on them and then you just die and you're like, I don't know what hit me. And then you do it 3 times and then you're like, oh, in the grass, there's a black blob that I stood on.
And it's like, I could shine a light and clear them all, but is it worth it? So I'm like, I guess I'll clear some of them. And because I guess they got like the bear traps as well that serve... they're a bit more interesting because they don't damage you much, but they freeze you in pace, but enemies can get you. But it's not fun dodging them.
Also, you can reveal them by just shining your torch on the floor and they stay on the screen. So it's like, they're a bit easier to get around.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about the black blobs on the floor.
Mate. Like, the amount of times I died to those, and I was just like, come on.
Oh, you
Like, it's
died
just
to that.
stupid.
Oh, I will
Yeah, loads
mention.
of
So
times.
I did end up playing through it all on easy, which might
Oh,
change my
okay.
experience. So I didn't. I started on easy because it defaults on easy. So I normally just leave on default. And then you said you're doing normal, and it was fine.
Yeah,
And
it's not
then
very hard.
I went to switch, and there was no way to switch apart from if I went to go and do like a previous episode, but like it was always like I'd lose like 2 hours progress. So I was like,
Right.
it's fine. I'll play it on easy. Like it's fine.
It's pretty easy, to be honest with you. It's not very difficult. I would get
Yeah.
there's a few difficulty spikes, like maybe 2, which would be like the vehicle boss battles, which would take me like 5 or 6 tries. But apart from that, it was pretty plain
Yeah.
sailing, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Fair enough. But the thing I was going to ask you is you kind of mentioned about like the day night, I guess not cycle, but like some of the aspects would be in the day, some would be at night. You're obviously a big fan of Twin Peaks, which this game is heavily inspired by. I'd say
Yeah.
out of anything, probably that's the single biggest inspiration because it's kind of like the whole vibe and setting. And I think it was the daytime sections, especially at the opening of the game, where I was getting the biggest Twin
Yeah,
Peaks
for
vibes,
sure.
and I was calling Kai in to say, "Look, have a look at this." You know? So I just want to know, as a huge Twin Peaks fan, like, did you like that? Did you feel like there's kind of stealing on like your beloved's ground? Like,
No,
how did
it
you
was
feel?
fine. It was fine, but like with everything with this game, it's only this deep. You know, like they were taking the set dressing of Twin Peaks and nothing else. You know, it was like they've
Yeah.
aesthetically taken it and then not done any of the other things. But that's fine. Like it's just a town, right? Like obviously it's very, very reminiscent, but it is like they've just skimmed the surface of it off and they're like, we'll just put bits of that here and there. Like the lamp lady is obviously like the
Yes,
log
I mean
lady,
that
like-
was the one
Yeah.
bit that was a step that was too close. So like in this TV show that Ollie and I like called Twin Peaks, there's like she's seemingly at the beginning the crazy like log lady, and she's the person who holds this log and talks to it, and like even the way she holds it is the same
It's the
to
same,
a character
yeah.
in this game, which is the light lady, and it's like the exact same role of character, and I'm like, this is getting like a little bit step between in like beyond inspiration, I think here. I'm not sure what I think about that.
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't know. It's just set dressing, right? Like they didn't rip off any of the story of Twin Peaks in any way whatsoever. It's just the town. And like
Yeah.
even the characters aren't that similar. They obviously have the diner, but that's just a diner, right? Like you can see that's what they're doing, but it's also
You
like,
know
has to
why
be
the
fun.
diner's
Yeah.
there. Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not
You can
saying-
see what they're doing, but
Yeah.
it's like
and I'm not saying anything they did is wrong or they shouldn't do with it, but like I'm someone who tends to lean to like to make something as new as you can. Obviously nothing's new, but like that was the bit where I was like, okay, that's maybe a little bit too far. But I did enjoy those sections. I did enjoy walking around, like the bits that I don't know people don't always like them, but when you're walking with another character and they're talking to you and you can wander around a little bit. Like I think I just liked that world, and I liked like as you said, the environmental detail is really good. So I did
Yeah.
just kind of enjoy wandering around and like looking at those locations. And I didn't expect much of that. Like all the trailers just show fighting in the woods. And there is a lot of fighting in the woods, but there was a surprising amount of other locations, mainly in the day sections, and other things that you do. And I wasn't expecting it to be as varied as it ended up being.
it actually ties in quite well to a question we had from a friend of the show, Helen Wells, hat maker extraordinaire, said, do you think the combat added to the game, or do you think a Life is Strange storytelling approach would have been better?
What do you think?
I don't know. I think maybe the combat just could have been a little bit better. Then it would have been better. I'd rather have it
Yeah.
than not have it. I would just rather it was better.
Yeah, I feel like for it to be that sort of like choose your own adventure Telltale style game, they would have to rework the story. The story as it is now, I mean, because of the gameplay, is they need to keep writing reasons for Alan Wake to be separated from everyone and then be in the woods. Like I was even like laughing to myself one time. I was like, I can't remember where I was, but I was just like in quite like a built up place separate to the woods with people, and I was like, how are they going to suddenly get me in the woods in this level? Like, how are they going to get me in there? Then, like, I get in a car in a car crash or something. I was like, okay, now I'm in the woods. So I feel like it would just be such a different game. But I do feel like a game with this sort of vibe and this sort of setting would work really well for like a Telltale. I mean, I think like a Twin Peaks style Telltale game would work really, really well.
Oh my God, I'd never even considered that.
That would be good.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, the daytime bits, I don't know. For me, I was kind of more just like running between objectives. I'd say more than I just like the shooting. I like the combat. It's not that good, but it's easy and it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
So
and it's absolutely not bad.
That.
Like there's nothing in it that just doesn't work. Like the actual like aiming, like, and the fact that like you don't have a crosshair because you got your torch. Like I even like that as a nice mechanic because you never need to be really accurate enough that it, you don't need like an Uncharted style or whatever. They just do like a dot. You don't need that.
So you said just now about day and night cycle and also the development. Did you look up?
I did.
The development. Oh, okay. So you're in the know as well. We're both in the know on development.
Yeah, don't tell them though. Don't tell them.
Who's going to pretend to not know?
Us.
Shall I pretend? I normally do it. So shall I pretend to not know and you can tell me?
Okay. Did you know that Alan Wake, when they began making it, it was originally going to be... Are you sitting down?
As always.
That's for audio listeners.
Okay.
He is. It was going to be an open world game originally, and they spent a lot of development making it as an open world game and built this big open world level. But of course, as you'll know, Ollie, the game we played was quite a linear game.
Huge levels, though.
Yeah, and so, like, one of the things is in that interview I saw with Sam Lake, which is an Ars Technica interview. If you want to look it up, it'll be very easy to find. It's really interesting going in about the development, especially because the interview was done quite a long time after it was made, and he doesn't sound very precious. Like he really likes Alan Wake, but he's quite brutal and honest about their problems during the development. But yeah, one of the things he kind of talks about is he thinks it really helped the game because they made this huge world, but then they were splitting it up into levels, but it meant that it was linear, but like it was very like wide corridors, and so it didn't feel very linear. And then even if there's areas that you never go to, you could on the Vista you could see places that are surprisingly detailed that you never visit, and it makes the world feel more real. And even when you're exploring, there's quite a lot of exploring you can do. You, as you say, you find all the manuscripts and radios and stuff, but then there's also like hidden caches and stuff. So it feels like they really made the most of this big environment they created. And although obviously it wasn't very efficient form of development, like it feels like all of that work wasn't lost.
Yeah, especially because there's a lot of lovely detailed and destructible cars in the game, which is very strange considering you drive about 3. Like you get in the car and you bump into a side and it like crumples and the bonnet comes off and it's like, what? Like, because I did that before I found out about this, So I was like, they put a lot of effort into all of these different cars that will handle differently and like look different when you don't really need them. And also some of the levels have got really long driving sections.
Yeah, I was so surprised.
There's no radio. There's no radio.
I mean, it was never so long. Boy, did you get bored like driving?
No, but you can listen to the radio.
That is, to be fair, that is the perfect time when it's like, rather than like standing in an empty shack doing nothing to hear the radio. That would be the perfect time for the radio to come in.
Yeah, and also the day and night cycle in the original game was like, in the day you hang out with the townspeople and gather up resources, and then at night you kind of defend with the spotlights and stuff like that, and obviously that didn't really make it across either.
But once again, he was saying that the fact that they developed this full day-night cycle, it means that like the lighting's very good for like for whatever time in the day, the sun is exactly as it should be, and they feel like even though like it doesn't change through the sky and in game time, the fact that they developed that made it probably better than it would have been. Obviously once again, bit of a different time. But he was kind of saying about how like they had their idea of the story and what the game was going to be, which seems a little bit closer to what it ended up being, but then they wanted it to be open world. And then so they were like, okay, so it could be day-night cycle. And then it just ended up turning into like a survival game. So in the day, you'll know that night is coming. So you're just going around gathering resources to prepare for the night. And then it sounds like it kind of just stopped being this narrative adventure and kind of ended up being I don't say generic survival game, but the gameplay was then like shaping what the story would be rather than the other way around. And it sounds like they had to get rid of the open world in order to align the story with the gameplay, which I think they ended up doing really well.
Yeah, another one of the holdovers, I think, because the thing that I read about it was that it was supposed to be like the next Crisis. Like graphics showcase, open world. The other thing that really surprised me is that the game's got a lot of like physics and like objects that could move with real physics. And I was like, it seems like such a waste of resources when you're playing it that things bounce around like they actually would.
Well, they have they have the enemy, the as I said, the things that fly you, the inanimate objects, and then they fly at you and then they bounce around.
Oh yeah, but I'm talking about like there's a bit where you're like running on a plane and it tips. Yeah. And it's like I was like, is this a physics puzzle? Like, what is happening here? Am I playing Half-Life 2? What's going on? Yeah, it was.
I think it was in the era where that was kind of normal. I think like once Havoc came out, like Havoc and Unreal, like where they allowed it to be in like almost any game, and so I feel like I feel like that wouldn't have been surprising of a game in that day. And if anything, we're kind of moved further away from that now, where everything's glued down now.
Yeah, I do think this just run on their own engine though. I think it's all they've made everything themselves.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, I don't think that's like it's surprising that this has. I think it would have, like, it was kind of at the point where it would have almost stood out that if there wasn't physics on objects like that. Like, I don't think that's an area of like a special note here. Yeah,
fair. You haven't said, but did you actually like the game?
Have I been being coy? Are you getting scared for the list already?
I'm not scared for the list. I've got no iron in this fire. I'm just curious because I want to talk to you about something else, but you need to tell me if you like it or not.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
You really enjoyed it?
Yeah, I mean, I think by the sounds of it, you enjoyed it a bit more than me, just judging from this conversation.
Yeah.
But like, I think especially early on, I think the first half, like I was surprised. Like I loved like the boat ride in, and then like when the first time you kind of go to the diner and stuff, and then obviously my first combat encounters were great because they were like quite tense early on, and I was surprised. I was like, oh, this is more ambitious than I thought it was going to be. And so very early on, I was very excited. But then by the end, I had kind of had a little kind of enough of Alan. And I had seen everything the gameplay had to offer, and it didn't really throw any twists. So I went down a little bit, but I still overall enjoyed it. And also just like the set pieces, like some of like the dramatic moments, like with kind of the way they do the sky. I love the way they do like the rapid like shadows across the landscape, like things
Great
like that
effects,
and big set piece moments. Like there was more of them than I was expecting, and I think they're done to a much better degree. Like this was a game that was made by about 55 employees, and it looks like, you know, it's not Naughty Dog level, but like it's not a million miles off what Naughty Dog was doing at the time this was released. And I was surprised and impressed by that.
The shadow effect across all of the combat scenarios is so good. I just wish there was more effects like rain or like wind that kind of move the trees a bit more, like any snow. I don't know, anything other than windy night, which is like the only effect. But anyway, saying that, I potentially have some good news for you. Did you play the DLCs?
I did not.
I finished them both.
Oh, well done.
And not my words, these are the words of Games Radar. They said the DLC content is so good it makes the main game look weak in comparison. Would you
echo that statement?
100%.
Oh,
100%.
Brilliant.
You know so spoilers for the end of the game. I'm going to spoil the very last scenario you're in the game. Sorry if you haven't played it. You know when you're shining the light on the words?
Yeah.
Imagine if they made a whole game out of that mechanic. And it's
like spawning it. So you got to explain the mechanic a bit.
Yeah, so there's words appearing in the sort of say like I don't think what a med kit is not one of them, but imagine you shine your torch on it and it turns into a med kit, falls in front of you, and you pick it up. They made a whole game around this mechanic.
Is that one of the episodes?
So it runs through both. The first episode's definitely the weaker one because it's kind of just a long combat scenario, but it's things like there's enemies coming at you and there'll be a word that says boom, and you like aim your torch at it and it will cause an explosion that will like blow all the enemies away, or it will be like, oh, I need to heal, and there'll be like light post, and it will go like and like appear and then like heal you. And like there's one where there's a hurricane and there's like words are blowing around, and some of them are bad and some of them say bridge, and then when you hit the ones that say bridge, it like builds a bridge in front of you. I was literally like, this is amazing. I can't believe how good this is. And they haven't kept it. It also has new enemies as well, which aren't in the game.
Well, don't spoil it for me. I might have to try them. So I didn't, because I was like, Yeah, I just hadn't heard much about them. And because obviously we got a big game coming up next, I kind of put my podcast gaming time into starting that early. But maybe I shouldn't have. But as we say, when we go to the list, like we will include the DLC in our idea. So if I end up playing it and then I end up really loving it and it bumps it up later on, like, so don't panic if you're an Alan Wake fan that me not playing the DLC will
the second
will hurt its chances.
DLC has got a set piece in it that is probably one of the most imaginative things I've ever seen. Like, I was like, I could not believe what I was witnessing when I was playing it. I'm not going to spoil it, but if you end up not playing it, I will tell you, because it's like it's crazy.
How long are the episodes?
They're about a chapter and a half. They're pretty short.
Okay.
They kind of
about
run for the right
about
amount
2.5 hours each. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, 2 hours, 2.5 hours each.
Okay.
And also they do the thing that like kind of Nintendo does, where they have an idea and then they literally turn it on its head over and over again. So like the words thing, you get to like a landmine type area where it's like you don't want to shine on anything because they're all bad. So you're like trying to go through looking up, like, because they're all like negative. So they're great. And I've potentially got some more good news for you.
Okay.
Did you play Alan Wake's American Nightmare?
I did not.
I also bought and finished that.
What?
And it is also really
You must
good.
have been going crazy, because I know when you finished the actual game, which wasn't that long ago, because you sent me your credit screen.
Yeah.
So you've been deep in Alan Wake the last few days.
This weekend that just passed, all I did was play Alan Wake. Like, because I find the gameplay so like the pace is so especially in the DLCs, like, it's so, you move forward so much that it's really easy to just play for a long time.
The main game is like that as well. It's very binge worthy.
Propulsive. It's propulsive, isn't it? Like, it pulls you forward. So
because I remember we were at similar, but no, you were ahead of me in the game. And then I just suddenly sent you the credit screen. I was like, I just played it for like 5 hours tonight, because it was, and I could have carried on playing. Like, it's very easy to play. There's no like pain points. There's nothing like laborious.
That's
there's no,
what I liked about it.
I can't be able to sort out my inventory, or like, what level is this gun, or do I need to grind? No, it's just action and story, like thrown at you nonstop.
Just quickly, I forgot to mention, DLC 1 is like quite typical of that era. That it's like you play through the levels and they're in dark mode and they're crazy, which is fine. The gameplay's pretty fun. But DLC 2, so they're called Signal was the first one, the second one's called The Writer, is much better and it's like crazy. And then American Nightmare is excellent, and it is also really short. It's £6 off. I had to buy it on Xbox 360, but it runs at 60 FPS, so it's fine.
So you had a direct comparison of graphics, I guess. How is that?
To be honest with you, it runs at 720p, but it's got like a 16 times anti-aliasing smear over it, so it doesn't look too bad. The lighting you can see is definitely not as good. But the cool thing about American Nightmare is that, you may not have noticed it, but in the game, when you turn on one of the TVs, it turns on they have like a Twilight Zone thing called Bright Falls or something like that plays. Yeah. Or Bright Springs. And Alan says, I used to write for them before I was a writer. You get sucked into an episode that he wrote of the TV show.
Yeah.
So rather than him being this like po-faced writer, he embodies like this leading man. And he says stuff like, it's about time I went full auto. And you have like an Uzi and you have like assault rifles. And that game has an amazing, amazing mechanic in it, where basically you have these scenes and then you read the script. It's not manuscripts, what it is, but it's a script, right? And it would say like, it was late in the day and summer was almost over and the CD player was on. So when you're in the office, you like put the clock to like 6 p.m, then you put the date to like the end of summer, then you turn the CD player on, and then it would say at the bottom like, and then a meteorite crashed. And then to reveal that, you have to do all the other things like in the scene. Yeah. And I was like, this is amazing. This is so clever.
That's a smart use of that mechanic of just the manuscript mechanic.
And the guns you have are like, you get like a nail gun because he's like working in like a repair shop. And he like, it's really funny. Like, it's written really well. It's got a really good joke in it where he's like talking to this woman who's obviously a character in the show. And he's like, I traveled a long way here. I had to push through so many barriers and like, it was a real mental toll on me. She's like, did you come from another dimension? And he's like, oh no, I came from New York. I was like, that is good. That is so good. But yeah, that's also very good. And of the DLCs and that, I would actually recommend American Nightmare because it's so much fun, and also the controls are different, so they're a bit tighter, and the UI is a bit tighter, so it's a bit easier to dodge and like.
It might be hard for me to commit to Xbox 360 American Nightmares. Or
No,
maybe I'll do
it's
the
not bad.
episodes.
It's not bad.
I'll do the episodes, then I'll see how much more I want.
I was so deep in this, I went on a Alan Wake message board and I said, what is the best way? I signed up and I said, what is the best way to play American Nightmare? And I had all these people reply.
So there's no PC release? Because the original had a PC release.
It does have a PC release, but I didn't want to sit in here. So I was like,
okay.
I was like, I've just played it on PS5. Is it going to be like horrible to go back to? And they're like, nah, it's fine. And it was fine. It did have a game breaking bug in it where the first character you speak to in one of the chapters like soft locks your console. But if you just restart the chapter, it gets rid of it. So,
okay.
But yeah, I did that. But I kind of in those DLCs, it's revealed a bit more like about how mad he actually is. And there's quite an eye-opening scene in one of them where it's a message from his wife, and she's like, oh, you know, you're like, you think you're so tortured, but you're like a rich white man, and like you have everything you could ever want. And he's so far gone that he hears that and he's like, God, I must be crazy. Like, because he thinks that there's no way that could be true, like about himself. He's like, oh, I must be mad if I believe that. So it's just like, I've had a lot of fun with Alan. I like him, despite how horrible he is.
I'm glad. There's more, because the other place you could get more Alan, seeing as you're obsessed now, is so it could, with a revealed you could find by just playing it that it's the same universe as Control, which is another game that we both played and like, and there's like references, quite big references to Alan Wake in Control. I knew enough of Alan Wake to realize when they were there, but not understand what they meant because I played Control obviously before this. But then they released DLC, which is like linking Control. So it's in Control, but it's like an Alan Wake story. Did you play that? Are you now tempted to play that?
Wasn't out when I had Control.
I know, but I know you've been on like the Alan train.
I know, I didn't buy Control for like 30 quid and then buy the DLC.
Oh, so you don't have Control anymore. You don't have Control.
I've lost Control.
He's lost Control. Maybe,
the only thing.
Maybe next time you come down with me, we should play through that together. That might be quite fun because I have Control and I love Control. So maybe that would be a fun one to do. I'm in Control.
Yeah. Maybe when I come down, you can use my account to play American Nightmare.
Yeah.
It's not long. It's not very long. It's the same 2 hours. It's very
because
good.
It was a week because they announced not long after Alan Wake 2 that they were making Alan Wake 2, and they released footage of Alan Wake 2 that ended up never existing. I think because so we should mention, so Alan Wake 1 wasn't a hit, especially at launch. It launched in the same week as Red Dead Redemption, and it had like a very prolonged development cycle, and I think it was a bit of a weird game a hard game to market, but it ended up eventually being pretty successful, where word of mouth, it kept spreading. The PC release, it kind of seemed to do much better than 360. You know, obviously they've now done this remaster, so I think it's now kind of done well, but at launch it didn't do very well. So obviously they wanted to do a sequel, and then that ended up not happening. But I think some of those ideas ended up making their way into American Nightmare, I think is the story.
Oh, okay, so that kind of makes sense with the scene setting thing. I guess that's part of it. Also, American Nightmare has new enemies that aren't in the game. It has like spiders and these like the giant guys. When you shine your torch on them, they break into two smaller guys.
Yeah,
which is quite fun. So, and you get like attacked by books, and like it's cool. It's fun, you know. Like it's a silly thing. All I need to remember when we're talking about this game, talking about the list, is that we're just talking about Alan Wake, and not the DLCs and the
no. You can throw. I think DLCs are fair game, right? Like with that stats in the game.
Yeah.
And we're reviewing the Alan Wake remaster, which has the DLCs.
We're discussing the Alan Wake remaster.
Okay,
yeah, which includes, so basically if you want to play those and you have Alan Wake, it's a bit hidden. You go to episodes and then you can find them there.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was in there, because I assumed that was just selecting ones I've done. And it was only when you mentioned it, because normally they'll say like downloadable content or something. So I didn't even know that was included, to be honest.
Yeah, also we haven't touched really on the story at all. I don't think it's...
Do we need to? I feel like we've... Is there anything...
I mean, what did you think of it? Did you think it was... I mean, it was enough of a mystery to keep me going, but I didn't really like you know, the whole thing between Barry and his wife hating each other. I kind of feel like his wife was painted really badly, and she's just trying to do good, and like she spends 90% of the game in her pants. And I was just a bit like, nah.
Yeah.
And like I get the whole thing that like, you know, Cole, I get it. I understand the game. The first time I played through, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand a single thing that was happening. But now I get it, and like seeing the band and how the bands talk about like they think they have a bit of this power because they were near the lake, and I kind of got all that, and it was quite cool. But it's just shallow, you know. Like there's nothing more to it than that.
Yeah, I think once again, like at the beginning, I was enjoying it more. And like things like you go to your house, you know, you go to like this, well, the place you're renting or whatever with your wife, and then the fact that like bad stuff happens, and then you got to talk to people, and they're like, oh yeah, there's no house there. Like there used to be a house there, but that got flooded years ago. Like things like that. I'm like, oh, this is quite intriguing, but it never goes much further than that. I like the sheriff character just because like everyone's a little bit either like useless or like there's like another really bad cop who's just like really evil, and like she's just like a capable good person who's not like immediately like saying, oh, you're crazy, or like not, she's not immediately on either side. She's kind of playing the role of like, I'm trying to do the law, but I'm looking at the bigger picture. And so I feel like you kind of like having one character like that worked really well. And it was almost kind of satisfying when she showed up. It's like, oh, okay, finally, like someone who can actually just do something about this mess that's going on. So I quite like that.
Yeah, for sure. She was a good character. There was the bit near the beginning when you're kind of chasing this guy around who says he's kidnapped your wife, and then it turns out he hasn't. I didn't really get what that was all about.
Yeah, I think that was just set up gameplay. Like, because you do a lot of stuff, and they're like, meet me here. And then you go there, and they're like, no, instead, meet me here. With no explanation why. And I'm like, okay, I'll meet you there. And it's like, because they've kidnapped your wife. And it's like, oh, no, we haven't kidnapped your wife. And it's sort of like, I think that was... You know, if this was a fantasy game, you would have to have collected 5 crystals. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I did like the Thomas Zane as well, the other writer.
Yeah.
Like the idea that Alan was probably inspired by this old story about this diver falling in the lake, and that kind of comes through. And then Thomas Zane's actually been through all of this before you. And
yeah,
the first part where I was like, oh, this game's actually like quite cool was when you first speak to him and he like gives you a torch and it just goes like, boo, like down a light beam. And I was like, oh my God, like they're just doing whatever they want. Like they're not trying to be cool by any means. They're trying to be crazy.
And it also,
so I really liked all of the... Go on, sorry.
It's like he's gone through the same thing that Alan
exactly,
has. But didn't make the right decision at the end, or it didn't work out. And so Alan's like got some reference point and it's like, well, I've seen what one path is, you know, so I'm going to try and do another path. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, that was cool. The conceit of obviously Alan being terrible, I didn't mind. I mean, the fact that he's probably the worst dressed game character I've ever seen was pretty annoying. Like, he wears what, like a shirt with a hoodie on and then a jacket on and then a blazer on top. And then the other characters, the bit where you're being chased, they're like, you can't get that guy if you see his jacket. Like, I can't believe
I get it. Like, people want to make their characters unique and like no one else in video games is dressed like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean... Yeah, it's just like, it's a mad shot. And he would have had multiple points to change throughout this game, but he commits to it for like, I think pretty much throughout.
Yeah, and there's even a bit in the DLC where he's like watching a memory and he's having his photo taken for an event. And his wife's like, whoa, you brought the suit out. But he's just wearing the exact same thing. Yeah. That's like, come on.
So something we haven't mentioned is... I mean, we mentioned them a bit. We haven't mentioned the way they're done. It's like the live action moments, which has kind of become a little bit of like Remedy have become sort of known for, is kind of including live action moments. Like there's like those fake TV shows that you mentioned, the kind of Twilight Zone ones, and then the talk show that I mentioned, which has Sam Lake, the creative director, in it.
Yeah,
and they got a funny moment. They're like, go on, do the face, and he does like the Max
Payne face. Yeah.
But they're all quite cheaply done, and I'm always not sure. I don't want to offend anyone here, but like. I think a lot of them aren't actors. I think they might be the development team acting out in them. I kind of got that vibe.
The main guy that plays Alan is a model. He's not an actor. But
so Alan isn't. I'm more talking about like those. There was one that I watched, which is like it's almost as if they're in the Federal Bureau of Control, but he's basically saying that I've changed outcomes. So if every time I shoot the gun, it will be a blank and it won't go off, like that one. And I don't know. They like it didn't look like a room for like it looked like they filmed it in the way that they could in like they probably filmed it at the office or something. But it was quite endearing. Like it kind of reminded me of like making student films like back in college.
To be honest with you, I was dreading those scenes because I remembered them from the first time I played, and actually this time around I enjoyed them. Like Alan being in the room, like watching himself in the room, like walking around.
Yeah.
Like it was good, you know. Like they kept me watching, and the ones. Not to go on too much about the DLC, but the ones in the DLC are a step above this, so, which are really cool. But I didn't mind all of that. Like the things I hated in the first one, or made me cringe, I guess, were like the cutscenes, the manuscripts, and the TV. And this time around, I didn't mind them. But like, this has been a very easy 2 weeks, and this has been a game that I have liked. I wouldn't say that I loved it, but it was just I like the genre, so it's very easy to just keep playing. Not think too much about it. One thing you did touch on was the connected to Control. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not one for connected universes. I know, but the problem that I have with them personally is that like they think that they're expanding it, but actually they're shrinking it because you're showing me where all the edges are. Whereas like if I didn't know where the edge was, your mind can go mad. But it's like, oh, okay, now that thing is. You've explained it to me now because it started, you know, and that's what's going to happen probably with Alan Wake 2, which I'm definitely 1,000,000,000% going to get because I'm on board. But I'm like, I don't know how I feel. I kind of want it to stay on its own because it's quite weird. And, you know, he's a book writer and he's, you know, this po-faced author, and they've done like, oh, he's a TV star and he's like this character. Like they could do so many more of those based on the 2 they've done. And it's like, I don't really want them to. I liked Control. I didn't love it. I like this more than Control, though, I think.
Like, I normally agree with you, like, let things have their own universe. But I think the thing about Control is their whole idea is, like, they're investigating all of these really varied, completely different, strange things, where almost in anything could happen in them. And, like, the Alan Wake story is just one of them. And then, like, there's, like, the objects of power, which are, like, I think that's what they're called, like, in Control, that like, these special objects that, you know, are in some way... you know, something crazy related to them. And then like it turns out like Alan Wake, the clicker is like a very obvious one of those, which is something from Alan Wake, this thing that, you know, you end up using to kind of complete the game. And I think that Control is so open and saying it's a place where they're investigating all of these crazy things. The story of Alan Wake is a crazy thing. I don't think the Controls world is going to limit Alan Wake. And the Controls world is so varied that like Alan Wake couldn't really limit it. So I think normally I would agree with you, but they're so close. I think in this case, like it's fine.
Yeah, well, let's see how we go. We don't know. Yeah, with Alan Wake 2 either. So Alan Wake 2 as well. Like I am on board. I wonder how much of it
looks so good.
I mean, watching back the Gamescom trailer. I don't know if you saw that.
I did. I saw the first trailer. I don't know if that's the games. No, I don't think I've seen Gamescom one. I haven't seen anything of Alan Wake in it. I've only seen the other character.
Okay, so basically the Gamescom trailer, they said they have him on the chat show again, in real life, and they're like, "Oh, here's the return by Alan Wake, a fictional story by the writer Alan Wake about how he got trapped in Bright Falls or whatever." So he's sold the manuscript from the first game as a book, and that's kind of where it's coming from. And that's the like jumping off point. I'm not going to say, I know you're spoiler phobic, so I'm not going to say anything more, but that's kind of where they've come from with it. So I don't know. It should be cool.
Yeah. I did my thing as I saw the first trailer, knew I was 100% on board, and now have avoided everything, which is my normal turtle shell method of consuming.
I just hope they keep
information.
I hope they keep Alan weird. Like he's a weird dude. And like,
I hope they don't actually make him cool or competent or anything. Just because it wouldn't be him.
Exactly. Like he's cool and competent in the American Nightmare, but like the bits where he's not in the TV show, he's this strange guy. Like it kind of works because obviously when he's in the show, he is that character. So, but yeah, it was a very easygoing 2 weeks, enjoyable. I mean, they could have called him Adam. And then Awake would have still worked, and it wouldn't be funny. But I guess Alan's fine. I did think that all the way through.
Oh dear.
Okay, questions. JT on the Discord said, do you both think that the unintentional hilarity of some of the dialogue and scenes take away from the story it's trying to tell? For me, I feel that the story was great. It was just lacking in a few places.
I mean, you've kind of said that you think you were fine with it. you were on board with that. I think because you had played it before, you went in expecting it. I think I was expecting the dialogue to be a little sharper than it was. And I think by the end, I was kind of on board of it and just enjoying it for its kind of like campy melodrama that it is. But I think I was expecting that to be it to be written a little bit more naturally, I think.
Yeah, I read back on some stuff like when this game came out, and like nobody was saying about Remedy being like these master storytellers. They're all like, these are the cinematic action people. I guess because of Max Payne, they were like, these are the slow motion more so than the story. I don't know where they got the story, where they picked that up as being like, because I mean, if this was the game.
Well, I think it is.
I don't know.
Well, I think because they were, because you think about back to your comparisons of other games at the time, like there weren't many games attempting stories like this. And I think the fact that it was set up as like, it's set up like a TV show. So like it's done in like episodes, and then an episode ends, and then it'll do like a previously on Alan Wake and do like a recap of a story. And then, as you said, it will do like some licensed music in between. And so I think just the setup of it being like a TV show, and it was back in the day where I think a lot of gamers were like desperate for like games to get like recognition, and it's sort of like, look, this is like prestige. This is like a TV show, Whereas nowadays it's like the other way around. TV shows and films are desperate to use video games because that's how they make all the money. It's like we've kind of flipped the other way around. Also, I did have a note. Like, do you think video games should be more like TV shows than films?
You mean like? Because they should, because they're longer.
Like the narrative, because
100%.
You play them in lots of, but I feel like most games go for film rather than TV show.
Yeah, TV show definitely works better. The problem that games have is their length. So like, people say, I don't know, Resident Evil 8 or 7 is really scary, but it's like, well, when you've been fighting the same enemies for 15 hours, it's not that bad. So I think games just generally need to be shorter, and the episodic format does work, especially because it has a, like, previously on. Every game should have that when you load it up.
Yeah. And I know it's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
But they had it in, was it Driver? I was trying to think what the other game that had it.
Yeah.
We did for the list that had it. And I always appreciate it. Obviously, Telltale, very famously, they do their previously as on as well, which is very important because it's your choices. It works really well. But the other game I think of, and I spoke about it in the podcast, is the original Last of Us, which I know has ended up becoming a TV show. But each segment really feels like a TV show. Like they really have, like they have their overall story, then they have like the bit with with this character, the bit where you meet these, like in this location, and like it all, or like this season, it really feels split up in TV shows. And I think that's why that narrative works so well. And I think Last of Us Part 2, like it doesn't, it feels like one long story.
Yeah.
And I think that's why maybe some people prefer the first one.
Yeah, well, I also remember because Last of Us 1 and 2 were the only games that we've done that I've recorded. And I remember saying to you at the time of Last of Us 1, I was like, yeah, I stopped playing like kind of when it felt right. And each of my recordings was like 1 hour. So like it was even split up kind of intentionally like that. But yeah, you're totally right. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Every game in the world needs to be 20% shorter. There's not one game that wouldn't benefit from being 20% shorter. This is a message from Chris on Twitter, who brought up something that I hadn't really thought about. They said, how did you find the unique approach to gunplay? I'm not sure if it's just me, but I found it jarring at first as there's no aiming down sights, and instead of having hip fire while the aim was the torch. It was fun though. Yes, it was. I actually, I like hip fire. I don't like aiming down sights all the time. I feel like every game feels the same because every game is you pull the left trigger to aim and then the right trigger to shoot.
Yeah, I mean, you don't aim like down sights like where it goes. It's not like Metal
Gear
Solid
he's saying
2
you don't. Yeah.
Like it doesn't go that close, but it's not that far off like Gears of War or something. It's just you have the torch which is it's a wide, it's a wider aim, but like, you're not really going for headshots or whatever. Like, normally it's getting the darkness shield off is the main thing, and then I mean, at least on easy, they take only a few bullets to go down after that.
Yeah, also the auto aim is really good. The
Yeah.
auto aim is very sticky. No, I like not aiming down sights. I think it's cool. I mean, one thing is that I think between Max Payne 2 and this, Resident Evil 4 might have come out, which maybe changed it a little bit, because Max Payne, you have a cursor on the screen at all times, so... But then again, they did keep that for 3, so maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think we're ready to list it.
Okay, let's put it on the list. Okay, so this is going to be the 47th entry on the list. Is it on the screen already? I can't see it. Is it hiding?
No, I'm writing it on now. I forgot to write it.
I don't know if it was hiding in the darkness somewhere, and I was
writing it out. I'm Alan Wake, and I am a writer. There it is.
Also, for those that are listening to the audio version, there's a original Nintendo seal of quality next to the Nintendo section, the unintentional Nintendo section of the game, which is Earthbound, Pikmin 4, and Yoshi Island, which I believe are the only 3 Nintendo exclusive games we've done. All ended up right next to each other.
Zelda?
Oh, yeah, Zelda. Yeah. Zelda feels different, though, doesn't it? Zelda feels different.
It does. You're right.
So this is our first Remedy game. So we got Max Payne 3, but obviously that wasn't done by Remedy.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of what would be like, what's the closest game to Alan Wake we've done on the list? Like, where would the bar be? Have we done anything similar to it?
Oh, it would probably be somewhere between Resident Evil and What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yeah, or even Half-Life Alyx, but that's so different.
Half-Life Alyx, actually, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit... That's quite survival horror-y. So yeah, there's not an obvious comparison, because with some games where it's like, oh, we're putting on a first-person shooter. Okay, well, is it going to go above or under Halo? Like there's some obvious like barriers. So let's go with you first, because I'm very curious. Where would you put Alan on the list?
I'd probably put it around the Nintendo seal of approval. So
okay, but we
14,
don't want to mess
15,
it up though. We don't want to.
I know we don't already want to mess it up, but I'm already thinking 14, 15, 16 kind of area, I think, for me.
So you've placed it now underneath Yoshi's Island?
I just let go of it. I just let go of it. I'm not officially...
You just dropped
anywhere around there is fine by me. I don't know. I was just thinking. I'm not officially placing. But that's where I would put my opening pitch.
So that would be... above the Subterra board game, above What Remains of Edith Finch, and then above your little duo of Lost Souls, Killer 7 and Jet Set Radio and Ooblets. That like area from like 16 to 20 is a really weird area of the list, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's like you think Ooblets is too high. I think Killer 7 and Jet Set Radio are too high, but I'm happy for them to be there because I appreciate you. And then What Remains of Edith Finch is there, which is like it's like that's the choice from all of the viewers. And then it's a board game. It's just like it's so weird trying to think section. Where would Alan Wake go amongst
It is
those.
a weird section. But you're thinking 16 to 20 then?
Yeah, I'm thinking, because obviously I'm thinking above Killer 7 and Jet Set Radio. So but I probably wouldn't put it above What Remains of Edith Finch.
Really?
Yeah. I found What Remains of Edith Finch more interesting than this. I found like I think if it was your 20% shorter or a bit more shorter or the length it was, but like if it added new enemies, a new like, or not even new weapons, but new interesting scenarios with the light mechanic or something, maybe it would. The combat, I think, was fine, but I think for the amount I did it, I was done with it by the end. And as you said, with the story, it was interesting enough at first, but it never got more interesting than the premise they set out, I think. But I really enjoyed, like, as you said, the audio design was excellent. I think that those set piece moments were really good. It's a weird game and it's an interesting game, and I did want to see whatever they were going to throw next to me, and I had no friction in doing that. Yeah. But What Remains of Edith Finch, I think, was throughout a more interesting and surprising and varied game.
Can you take my word for the DLC being a step above? My word and Games Radar's word, not just me. Pushing it up 1 point. There are so many set pieces and interesting things. Just one of them is there is a crane that you control remotely that has a light hanging off of it, so it's physics, and then dotted around are words, and you're swinging the crane, so when it stops, the light shines up and hits the word, and creates or destroys something for you. And it's like, that is amazing. It's
that is exactly what I wanted, but is it hurt by the fact that is in the DLC? And I know. Well, no. Like the game's good. Like I enjoyed the game. Like it's, this is the 47th entry in the list, and I'm talking about like the 16 to 20 range. Like there's only good games up at this section, or at least games we enjoyed. But the DLC is fair game, as I said. But the majority of people that played Alan Wake wouldn't have played that DLC. Mm-hmm. Maybe, we stepped up a little bit more of the remaster, but the fact that the game didn't have any of those interesting twists, probably because of the development and the way it was kind of shaped around, and it took them, knowing what the game was and with a fresh head to come up with some of this stuff and implement it. Like, does that kind of hurt it a little bit? The fact that you do have to say, like, oh, but if episode 2 of the DLC
definitely
has,
100%. Yeah, you do, because it's like after the credits. And after it's finished, and you have to click for a special menu.
I didn't even know that the DLC was included.
Yeah, I know. It is. I tell you what, I came into this saying I need to think of this just as Alan Wake and not as the DLC. And you said, well, the DLC is there. So
no, it is fair game. Well, tell you what. What about if we put it one under Edith Finch? I will at some point play the DLC. And then so some point between the next podcast where it's just us, because otherwise we'll have a really confused guest sitting there while we discuss Alan Wake DLC. So maybe next podcast where it's just us, I will bring up again, and we'll see whether the DLC elevates it for me as well, and maybe it could go up a few spaces. Does that sound fair?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to write next to it. I don't know, it's dependent. That looks like about right. So it's Alan Wake DLC dependent. Okay.
Also, it should also move down one more space.
Oh my god!
Because, well, do you know why? Why it has to? Why do games have to move down one space?
It's probably something to do with the camera.
So you can have the game inverted, not when you're driving a vehicle. So if all of the footage where I'm driving a vehicle and the camera's going crazy, it's because you can't. I look through all the settings. Just when you're in a car, the camera is not inverted. And it's not the end of the world in a car because you're not aiming or anything, but that the rule is when the game doesn't have good inverted options, it has to move down a space. So even though I would want it above Killer 7, we are moving it under Killer 7 because we don't make we do make the rules, but we follow the rules we made.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm feeling a bit in two minds about this DLC dependent thing. I don't want you to feel like you're under pressure to play it because we already play so many games and we don't have any time.
Yeah, but I got like almost a month to do it, to be fair, because we got 2 games with guests we'll mention soon, back to back, and so.
Well, let's just take. I'll tell you what, I won't have it written on there, and we'll just keep it in mind.
Okay, if I play the DLC, we will reopen the Alan box and
the Alan box
and discuss it. It's funny. Alan's just quite like. No offense to any Allens, but it's quite a normal name, and
I know,
no judgment. I'm called Joe, Joe Blogs. I am the default common name, so no. But it's just fun, just Alan. It's just so
Alan, and people calling out for him, and it's just I don't know why it's funny. I don't know why it's funny, but it is. That's why I was his name should be Adam Wake because it wouldn't be funny.
Yeah, it is. It is just a funny name. It's just once again, no offense. I'm called Joe. Yeah. Okay. My made-up name was Stampy, okay? I'm the master of uncool names, but Alan's just a really uncool name, which just makes it really funny. I mean, it fits him very well, to be fair.
Yeah.
It fits his
character. I think they wrote him, didn't they, to be the polar opposite of Max Payne.
Oh, was that the idea?
That was the writing, yeah. He was supposed to be dorky, unable to use a gun very well. I mean, obviously that changed, but
yeah, I know.
A very uncool guy, so I guess some of that must have come through.
Yeah. Anyway, so do you want to read the weird area of the list that Alan has made a home in?
Yes. So 16 is Subterra, 17 is What Remains of Edith Finch, 18 is Killer 7, 19 is Alan Wake, and 20 is Jet Set Radio Future.
Can we have next to, so we got the Nintendo seal of quality. I feel like those next 3 games, we need like the Ollie seal of quality, because like we got Killer 7, Alan Wake, and Jet Set Radio to go. I feel like we need like Ollie's seal of quality for those 3 games.
I mean, to be honest with you, I would have Alan Wake higher, but I'd also have Killer 7 and Jet Set Radio much higher. I wouldn't have them all down.
I'm not saying about moving anything in the list. I'm just saying the list as it is. Like, but I feel like if your seal of quality, that's enough for you to say like, I think they should go higher. Like, I just feel like maybe
I'll make something to go there. I'll make something to go there.
My work is to play the DLC. Your work is to do that. Maybe have your face on it. Maybe do a little thumbs up. That would make me happy. Anyway, that's Alan Wake on the list. Well done, Alan. Managed to just about sneak into the top 20, and who knows, may end up even higher in the future. But that's the end of our chat about Alan Wake for now, but we have plenty more games coming up that we're going to be doing soon, including the back-to-back guests like we mentioned earlier. Do you want to mention what games we're going to be playing and when?
So we have next time on the 22nd of September, we've got XCOM 2. We're playing the War of the Chosen, I think it's called.
I've started that, so I can help you out a little bit here, because I wasn't sure how that worked. So if you get XCOM 2 now, it comes with all the DLC and stuff. You don't have to buy anything separate. Like, I'm assuming. I mean, that's what it did for me. I didn't have to buy anything special. You load up the game and it says like that version and the normal version. It's just 2 big options. It's not hidden like Alan Wake. So and that's the default top one. So you can't get that wrong. But it seems, and in the game, it will show you what is the DLC. There's little symbols next to it, so it doesn't seem drastically different. I got some cool new hats from it, I know, that I've been dressing up some characters with. So that's like we'll talk about soon. So yeah, if you want to play the DLC one, just buy the game and it will just be there on the main menu.
Yeah, so that's 22nd September, XCOM 2. And then on the 6th of October, we have Slay the Spire, which is just boy time. Just me and you, Joe. No guest. And then on the 20th of October, we have Alien Isolation, which I found out through research, the best version's actually on the Switch. So if you want to play the highest graphics, best quality version, it's the Switch version.
That's interesting.
It's because it came out after...
That's not right.
The old games didn't get any updates for One X or PS5.
Yeah, isn't it like... It's got better anti-aliasing, and in the old versions, they look really like jaggedy. Isn't it something to do with that? I believe it's like the post-processing's improved on Switch. I'd heard that before. Yeah,
I guess probably actually the best version is probably PC, but we try and stay away from that here.
Yeah, we're in our offices enough. We were desperately trying to get out.
Yeah. We have Alien on October 20th, and then on November 3rd, we have a guest who has not confirmed their game.
Okay.
But that is what we're doing. Yeah, that's our back-to-back guests that week.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Cool. Awesome. So, yeah, if you can play any of those games, a lot of them are either older games or just not very expensive games. So I think these are good ones to jump in. I think especially Slay the Spire. I think that's a game that, once again, a very good Switch game, and a game that you can play for as long or as little as you want. Don't be scared off by the fact that it's cards. Like, I promise you, it's a very engaging and very easy to get into game. So if you've always been someone who's kind of just listened to the podcast and just sort of perked up when it's a game that you know, feel free, join us, play one of these games. If this is a game that in a genre that you don't normally play, choose one of them that sounds interesting. We'd love for you to play along, and if you write in an interesting comment or question, there's a good chance you'll end up on the show. That's what we love around here, so it'd be good for more people to join in with that. Yeah, for sure. And just a couple of other bonus points things. We put out an animated podcast episode last Friday. Definitely check that out if you haven't. We've got some community people animated it. It looks really great and it's done really well. People love it, so definitely check that out. Also, we've just put out, on the day of recording, Joe, a Blood Brothers episode 9, which is called Bloodborne Explained. And I think it's my favourite episode that we've done. I saw you tweeted something saying about like this is our best episode or something.
Good. All right, I tell you what, I've gone back and watched that episode like 3 times because it is that good.
You're in it.
I know, but it's so good. We need to toot our own horns sometimes, and I'm saying this is the one. Can
you tease it? Because I'll be honest, I don't remember. I edit them, but I edited it a long time ago, and I've not gone back. What's so good about this episode? Why should people check this one out?
Okay, so it starts with Vicar Amelia. Mad boss.
I mean, you got to explain. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, mad boss fight. Then there's this whole thing we get into. So you go to these really crazy areas. It's like the first big change of area. So most of the game takes place in a town. And this episode, we go to like a forest, like a castle grounds kind of foresty place. We get into this whole thing about Bloodborne Explained and like talking about the lore of the game and like looking at the enemies and trying to figure out what their jobs are. That's all fantastic. And then we get into this weird thing where we're talking about like changing rooms. Which people from the UK will know, but people from international might not. It's like a TV renovation show. We start like talking about the locations as if they were renovated. It's a really good episode. It's like, I feel like we hit our stride because it like wasn't that difficult. I was confident with it and we had a good time. So that's the one that I think is our best one so far.
Well, what we tend to do is because we tend to record like 3 or 4 of them in a row. And then, like, the final episode we record, we hit our stride, and it's a great episode. And then Ollie goes home for, like, 2 months. and then comes back, and he's like, how do I play the game? How do I talk and play the game? And then we begin again. So every, like, 3rd episode is great.
that's like what... Gone. You know, Alan Wake's, like, previously on Alan Wake. It could be like, you know, I was running west in the forest, and by the way, LB is dodge. Like, that would be so helpful. Like, by the way, the D-pad is how you change weapon. Like, oh, okay, thank you, Alan.
That's me. That's my job. I will be Alan. I will narrate your gameplay for you.
Oh, one more thing. It's also the first episode with the item bell as well.
Okay, so Ollie kept missing finding items, so I ordered a bell. And it was also good because Ollie was down for a weekend. And like I'd ordered the bell ages ago, but it arrived while he was here. And so like the first day we recorded, it wasn't there. That I was able just to spring it on him or ding it on him, you could say. Seeing as it's a bell.
Yes, definitely check out Blood Brothers. I mean, check it all out. But episode 9, if you want to just check one out, that's the one.
Okay, right. We'll stop trying to sell it on you, but we do think they're really fun. I mean, I love it because I love Bloodborne. So if you have any interest, feel free to check that out. Anything else going on bonus points, or is that about it?
We had a big influx of new Patreon members. So hello, Patreon people. I'm assuming you all saw the animated episode and wanted more extra credit. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you here. But apart from that, I think that's it.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Right, we'll see you all in the next episode where we'll be doing XCOM 2 with a mystery guest. So come back to see who that is and what our thoughts on XCOM 2 is going to be. A very different game from anything we've done on the list, which I always really enjoy. But apart from that, thank you all so much for watching or listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Cheers, bye.